Okay, let's see. Okay, let's see. Oh, hello everyone. It's been a long time coming. I'm trying to make sure that the connection is okay. Oh, on my end, it doesn't look good. So let's see. Let's just wait one more minute to catch up. Da-da-da. So before we get started, let me just say I know that this was planned for a few days ago, but I just wanted to make sure when I came here that I was prepared, or as prepared as possible. First and foremost, happy No Spend Black History Day. If you don't know, this is an action that was called for by Black churches across the United States, that today we would be not participating in purchasing as a Black collective, to show our strength. And so the primary store, of course, is Target, because Target has gone back on its word about its investment in Black businesses. Okay, it looks like things are happening. So I'm just going to continue, and hopefully this connection gets better. Okay, so in today's video, we'll be discussing Project 2025, and we will be talking about chapters 10 and chapters 11. Chapter 10 is on agriculture, and chapter 11 is on education. So I have my notes here, and so if you see me looking down, that's what I'm looking at. Okay, so the way that I broke up my reading for chapters 10 is that I have like 3 sections. The first section is the facts that the author of the document is presenting. And when I say fact, I use that word lightly because I didn't necessarily go and fact check the facts that they present. And then the ideals that they're promoting is the next section. And then lastly, the final section would be questions that I still had after reading, and the real life applications of what the conservative authors are suggesting that conservative leadership does. So I'm just going to get started. So basically, in chapters 10 goes from page 289 to 318, right? While reading this chapter, there were 2 overarching thoughts for me. The first one was, what does USA conservative agriculture look like? And what would the US be like if the conservatives had their way? Number 2 was, what course of action would be good for the collective of us? So whenever I go forward with these lives, if while we're discussing Project 2025, whenever I say facts, I want you to take that word very lightly. But it's just like what the authors are stating that is jumping out to me, and that's why I put it under the category as facts. So let's go through the facts, right? So the USDA runs food stamps and other food welfare programs. It distributes farm subsidies, so that's the money that farmers and ranchers get to conduct their business, to raise their livestock, to plant and to harvest. It covers issues including conservation, so how they preserve the land that they're using. It also covers biofuels, forestry, and rural programs. The next fact, and that's page 291, that's where that's found. On page 292, the USDA's fiscal years for 2022 through 2026 has 6 goals, but the authors focus on 3. The 3 goals that they're saying there was a lot of focus on for like the preceding administration was climate change, renewable energy, and systemic racism. As we go further into the chapter, you'll see that the authors position themselves as like against these 3 issues, these 3 goals, because they feel like it should take the back seat to the farmers getting to plant and harvest however they want. That climate change, renewable energy, systemic racism, all those things should have a backseat to the bottom line of production. Number 3 is the Commodity Credit Corporation is a funding mechanism. So the authors share with us, the readers, where and how the funding comes from for the USDA or any farming programs, any food programs. That's where all that money comes from, the CCC, Commodity Credit Corporation. That's found on page 294. Excuse me. So any farm bills that's passed by whatever legislative branch, whatever Congress or the House, the states, or whatever, what is it called? Whoever the people are who make the bills, whatever the farming bills, all of whatever they pass, whatever money is required, comes from the CCC. Right? And the author shares with us that the CCC has $30 billion at their disposal to make sure that America's farmers, ranchers, and everyday people get from producing the goods all the way to consuming the goods. We have $30 billion in the CCC to make that happen. The next fact is that when it comes to school lunch eligibility, schools with no low-income students are grouped together with schools that have a high level of low-income students. And because of this, kids from both low-income households and high-income households benefit from school lunches. They're able to participate in getting free school lunches during the school year. Which the author positions themselves as saying that because students from all economic types of households get to have access to school lunches, that's somehow taking away from the needy to give to the rich, right? So that's how they position this fact. within the reading. And then the last fact is that the authors state their anticipation for opposition from environmental groups and from liberals and leftists, right? So they're saying that while their intentions are this, they are anticipating that they will have pushback from left groups and from environmental conservation activists, which I believe they should have prepared for it, and I'm sure they have prepared for it, right? And so, and I agree that if one side wants to not prioritize environmental protections, there should be people fighting back against that to save our environment. And so them talking about having an anticipation for pushback happens on page 310. So now we're getting into the meat of it all. And these are the ideals that is being promoted, right? So here, I laid this out as the recommendations that they're making for the conservative leadership to enact. And then I talk about, and I weigh on my opinion on that specific recommendation. And so you can use like what they're wanting, what my opinion is, and then your reading to form your opinion. So let me just check this again one more time. Let me see. Is it giving issues again? I'm not sure. Okay. Give me 1 second. How do I? Okay, so hopefully that made a difference in the quality of the video. Let's see. Hello. Come on. Okay. I really don't know the quality. If the quality turns out to not be good, then I'll just have to redo this video. I thought by now I would have had all of this down, but it's seeming to be a little bit more complicated than I thought it would be. So, and this is the best quality that we can do. Okay, so let's continue. On page 290, the author is pushing for the USDA to focus on removing obstacles that hinder food production rather than pushing ancillary issues in front of agricultural production. So basically, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where the ancillary issues they're talking about is environmental protection. So they're saying that if we're weighing environmental protection versus food production should come first at the cost of environmental protections, which for me, as a mother, as an American, I believe that this country is advanced enough in our agricultural system where we can do both things. We can have environmental protections and for farmers to be able to produce the quantity and quality foods that we need for our country. I think both things are doable. I think you can have proper food production, safe, healthy food production, while we're also taking care of the environment and the land that's being farmed. And we're making sure that farmers are being treated equitably when it comes to funding. We can do all those things. I think we are a great enough country to do all those things at the same time. There's no need to let one of those things fall just for the benefit of the other. We're all in an advanced enough country where we don't have to lose one thing for the other. So then on page 293, the authors are pushing for farmers to be allowed to produce as much as they want. So that, and they're saying that if farmers are allowed to push as much as they, to create or produce as much as they want, as many goods as they want, that somehow will decrease the amount of money that us as consumers have to pay when the food gets to the grocery store. So then they sort of do this thing where it's like, if farmers get to produce as much as they want to, this will help low-income families who spend a lot more of their money on groceries than high-income families. And so my opinion is that if farmers are allowed to produce as much as they want, what happens to the excess food that they will produce? Because having a high number of production doesn't necessarily mean that it won't guarantee that prices will go down or that prices will be affordable for low-income people, because as long as low-income households cannot earn enough money to buy proper groceries, it doesn't matter how much farmers are producing, because they still won't be able to afford what the production is costing them in the grocery store. So they're giving you this their correlation, which doesn't necessarily, is not a foolproof correlation. And when the authors are talking about, farmers being allowed to produce as much as they want will help low-income families because they spend more money on groceries in comparison to high-income families. I don't necessarily think that they can equate it here, because the ultimate issue for affordability of food isn't what is the farming. It's more so if one household has $200,000 income a year, and then the other household has $35,000 a year, yes, their buckets that they're pulling from to go to the grocery store for that year is different. So no matter how much, even if they buy the exact same things for that entire year at the grocery store, it will always look different. The bottom line for both of those families will always look different because one family has a bigger bucket than the other. And the fact that they are saying that farmers should be allowed to produce however much quantity they want to and at whatever quality they want to is very dangerous for us as consumers, because then farmers will be left to their own devices. They might take shortcuts just to preserve the amount that they're actually investing into their produce, and that could really potentially have a lot of negative side effects on us as consumers. So then we move down to page 294. The authors recommend that conservative leaders incentivize the USDA to remove all publishings about their efforts of transforming the food system. And when they talk about transforming the food system, they're talking about equitability for like farmers and ranchers, like the amount of money that they're getting. They're talking about making sure that the regulations that are there to protect consumers, that the USDA shouldn't be publishing these things on their website or any other places that they usually publish on, which basically is regulating the USDA so that they aren't communicating with us as consumers. That's dangerous for us as consumers. The USDA should not be regulated to the point where they are prohibited from talking with us, the people, the consumers who are paying for these goods. And I really do find it ironic that for as much as the conservatives are saying that they would like to have free speech be back again, be a thing, they are very much so honing in on the different places where they don't want free speech to exist, because they want to make sure that us as consumers, the general public, no matter if you're Republican, no matter if you're Democrat, that you don't have access to certain information. They are making that clear in Project 2025. Okay. So then we're going on to page 300. The authors discuss what they term as broad-based eligibility when they're talking about food stamps. Food stamps falls under the USDA, and that's how they can bring that food stamps thing within, that's how they can start to discuss food stamps within this project, right? So they're saying that the conservative leadership needs to make the eligibility process for someone being qualified to have food stamps be more stringent. Because what they feel is that the fact that someone who could be found eligible to have Medicaid could then automatically be able to be found eligible to have food stamps is somehow circumventing the system, and it's not right, and it's costing taxpayers money, and so that should be done away with. And so they want it to be harder for food stamps to be granted to people who need it. So they go so far as to claim that the way this eligibility is has even allowed millionaires to enroll in the food stamps program. So, my takeaway as a single mom is that, number one, the authors of Project 2025 under the under the agricultural section are really declaring a war on poverty. No, not poverty. They're declaring a war on impoverished Americans rather than trying to eliminate what is causing poverty and what is pushing poverty and what is making people fall into poverty. They are criminalizing and they are making it hard for people who are finding themselves in impoverished circumstances. And that's for all Americans, no party. So then number two, my second opinion on what that ideal that they're promoting regarding food stamps is that when they talk about, I'm just trying to find a way not to like just see the complete absurdity of this. To think that someone who has $1 million at their disposal could somehow want to willingly subject themselves to the process of qualifying for food stamps, of then having to reapply for food stamps or get recertified for food stamps, the indignities that come along with those processes, that a millionaire will go and put themselves willingly through that just for the giggles of it all, is not likely. So when they say this, I'm sure if they push and look hard enough, they could give you some random person who just did it just to say that they could do it. But I do not believe that there are a plethora of millionaires just sitting in a government office trying to apply for food stamps. I don't think so. Some things are just absurd and we have to say it for what it is. So then on page 302, the authors speak about the topic of the WIC program, which is a program that provides food and mainly formula to new mothers and their babies. And so here, what they're really focusing on is that there needs to be a reevaluation of the regulations for the formula, for the companies that are producing formulas for the WIC program. They're saying that a lot of the shortage of the formulas for the WIC program is because of excessive regulations brought about by the previous by the previous administration, which are labeling regulations, right? My opinion as a single mom is that it's important for mothers to know what ingredients are in their baby's formulas. And the way that you find out what ingredients are on your child's formula is by reading the labeling on that box of formula. So if there's a manufacturing company that cannot conform to regulations of what the labeling should say, or like all the details that need to be in the labeling, they're trying to like not include all of the ingredients on their labeling, then those companies should not be allowed to manufacture formula. They're not ready to be on the market. If proper labeling is what's stopping you from going to market, you're not ready. So it's not a matter of doing away with the regulations. It's a matter of leveling up your business practices. Transparency is important when it comes to what we're feeding our babies. And something that I found interesting when it came to, like, you know, the WIC program and the formulas argument is that the authors are really throwing unveiled attacks and accusations at the Biden administration, saying that, you know, it's a lack on their part that there was such a shortage in baby formula. I know that the whole shortage on baby formulas began, and we could feel the real life effects of this when coronavirus first started in 2020. And what administration was in power during that time? The Trump administration. So throwing around accusations at the Biden administration really is just like pit for pat, because the real life effects of people not being able to find formula in the stores was starting since the first Trump administration. And no amount of writing on anybody's document can sway me, at least, to believe otherwise, because I experienced it in real life, right? And I'm sure a lot of you single mothers experienced it in real life. There were women asking and trying to network with other women to find out, oh, you know, I haven't been able to find formula at this store. What are you doing? How are you feeding your child? Like, in the absence of formula. This was happening way before Biden took office. So we're just gonna move past that. So then we going on to page 303. The authors discuss what thoughts they have on school meals. Really, it's more so like they want to regulate the access to school meals, saying that liberals want to expand access to school meals using a CEP 40% criteria. Meanwhile, conservative leaders should make it more difficult for all schools to be able to provide school lunches. That's what it plainly is being said here. And then they go on to say they want to eliminate the CEP rule altogether, and that the USDA should not provide meals to students during the summertime, unless those kids are in summer school. A lot of the efforts that are made for specific reasons. Children in America, American kids, should have secure sources of food, whether that's during the school year and during the summer. And however we as Americans need to make that happen, we need to step up to the plate and do that. There's no cost that's too great to make sure children are eating. And so, being that that is where I stand on the issue, I totally disagree with this idea that school lunches are to be eliminated. School lunches should be available to every child, regardless of what kind of income their parents have. The fact that the conservatives are prioritizing saving money rather than making sure that every child in America has food to eat seems very criminal to me. It seems like the priorities are not in the correct places, because they know that rich kids are going to be able to eat, right? Their parents will be able to make sure that they have food at home. But what about the parents who are food insecure? That's what we as Americans could stand for, is that all children, no matter what their parents' income status are able to eat. They have access to food throughout the entire year. America is well capable of doing that, and we should prioritize that always. So then we're moving on to page 309. So page 309, the authors suggest that the USDA with HHS, maybe that's like Health and Human Services, should not publish dietary guidelines. They make that very simple there on that page. My opinion is that we all, parents, single mothers, regular everyday people, we should have access to dietary guidelines on a broad basis, right? From the USDA, from Human Health and Services, because not everybody has access to a private doctor. Not everybody has access to a primary care physician or a pediatrician or a nutritionist for all of the year. Not everybody has access to that. So if the USDA and the HHS publishes guidelines that I'm sure are backed by professional doctors, licensed doctors, it will be to the benefit of all Americans that they publish this. Now, they'll publish what their findings are and make this dietary guideline, and then you as a parent, you as an individual can decide whether or not you will structure your meals around that guideline, or you will totally just bypass it. It's your choice. But I believe it's important that the USDA and the HHS do publish guidelines. So on this, I disagree with the authors of Project 2025. So after reading chapters 10 on agriculture, I can see that one, there's several direct accusations brought up on Biden's administration, which is like, focus on what it is that you're trying to tell us rather than attacking somebody who's already now out of office, right? Then number 2 is, while a lot of chapter 10 talks about letting farmers have autonomy and free reign, the authors also like tuck in their recommendation that spending money to directly help farmers and ranchers that are in crisis should be prioritized. And so they should protect farmers and ranchers that are in crisis only if the programs that they're already receiving doesn't cover that specific crisis. But what the authors don't do is that they do not tell you what specific crises would be considered eligible for those extra funding. So then I'm left with the question of, what happens to the farmers who are not already in a program, right? Do they not get help at all? And then it really seems to me that the conservative leadership wants to protect and provide funding to farmers who already are capable of protecting themselves and producing for the year without extra help. So again, it's like they're only leaving the funding there for people who don't need it. So then the funding won't be spent, and they're trying to preserve the funding that way and keep it all in the purse. So then the next thing is that when the authors need a reason, that's what I saw throughout that reading, is that whenever the authors need a reason to justify a recommendation, they like recycle through certain justifications, right? They recycle through it will be bad for low income families, or such and such will have taxpayers paying even more taxes, right? But they don't ever give you a concrete, like, A to B correlation, right? And so for me, I'm just like, you recycling through these justifications is lazy. It's very lazy work. If you're really saying, oh yeah, this is gonna have a bad effect, show us the proof, show us of when this happened before. And they don't really do that. So then the next thing I noticed in chapter 10 is that the authors on page 298 recommend for conservative leaders to separate agriculture provisions from food stamps. Then they say that they want to consider putting agriculture and food stamps on two separate timelines. So then essentially they're saying this would set them up to get rid of food stamps altogether, because as it is right now, if they want to get rid of food stamps, they would have to seriously gut the agriculture provisions, right? And they don't want to do that because that's also funding that's for farmers. So if you're trying to get away to do away with food stamps, you would also affect the money going to farmers. So what they want to do is they want to separate the two so that they can keep the money for the farmers, but take away the money that's there to provide food to low income families who are food insecure, basically. And it's like, that's just them staying consistent with this idea of they don't want to put money towards making sure that all Americans can eat. So what happens when the farmers get the money they need to plant the produce, to harvest the produce, to get the produce to market, but then not all Americans have the funds to go and buy that produce? Will it sit in the store and rot? What will happen to the excess food? Because conservatives want to give the farmers so much, right, to be able to produce as much as they want to. So let's say they produce as much as they want to, but then they will not make sure that every American has the funding they need to be able to go to the market and buy that produce. What happens to the extra produce? That's a question that we all need to ask ourselves. Republican or Democrat, we really need to make sure that, like, we're thinking about this properly. So then I'm left with this idea of what do we do, right? As single moms, what do we do? Given that all of what I just said is what is being recommended to conservative leaders. You need to become active. You need to exercise your political powers. You're not powerless. You need to make sure you're understanding whatever laws are being passed, whatever bills are being passed. You need to understand how that affects what you need to feed your family, what you need to make sure you have a voice in how bills are being enacted or bills are being brought to the floor, so that you make sure what's in the best interest of your child and what's in the best interest of you and your family is being represented. Make sure you know who your assembly people are. Make sure you know who your council people are. Make sure you know when like your district is having meetings, and attend those meetings so that you're more aware of what's happening, that things aren't just hitting you left and right without preparation. Make sure when you go to these meetings, you ask questions when you don't understand what's being said, because you can go to the meetings and sit there and not get it, and then whenever like you get a letter saying, oh, you're no longer qualified for blah blah blah, or food stamps is being done away with, it's not hitting you by surprise. Become active, become politically active. Make sure that you go register to vote. In New York in June, we'll be having a vote, an election, I mean, for the new mayor. Make sure that if you're not registered to vote, you go and you register. Whatever party it is, go and register to vote so that you can exercise your rights, your political rights, because that's what's going to protect the funding that you need, that will help you subsidize whatever income you have and help you to put food on the table for your child. And then what's more important too is that once you are politically active and you are going to these meetings and you are voting, that you are finding other ways, not just with your vote, but also with what little, whatever, what can I say? Whatever little time you have left after work, after taking care of your home, after taking care of yourself, after taking care of your child, whatever time you have left, whatever energy you have left, whatever money you have left, find a way to support your local politicians, the ones who you voted for, the ones who have your best interest at heart when they're going to fight for what our community needs. Find a way to support them. Go out to whatever events they're holding. Find a way to keep supporting their office even after they've been elected and they're in office. Find ways to donate to whatever they're championing, whatever new bills they're pushing forward. If they need volunteers, go and volunteer. Make yourself available, because none of this will be corrected until we become active. And we're actively fighting back against all of what these conservatives are trying to do. Find a way to contribute with more than just your vote. Find a way to keep contributing periodically so that things don't fall by the wayside, because we didn't just get here like this. It was because of inaction. It was because of not knowing and not having a general knowledge about what's going on or how to be politically active. We waited too long before we were awakened to what was happening. So now we're moving on to chapter 11. And if you are here with me this long, it's been 49 minutes. If you are here with me this long, I just want to say thank you. And I want to reintroduce myself, to spruce things up a little bit. My name is Nahuna. I'm the founder of the nahounhashaven for Minority Women Incorporated. It's a nonprofit organization I created to empower single mothers, we have a website. You're welcome to go and check it out. It's www.nahounhashaven.org. If you go on our website, you can sign up for services. We offer many services to single moms at low cost or no cost to you. And then if you are a single mom within shelters, there are specific ways you can contact us and get even more help. Then you can see what we're doing. You can see whatever events we have coming up, and you can become a member so that you can always have us as a support system, to be part of your support system, because it's important, especially during these times, that you have a strong support system. So don't forget also to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Instagram at Nahounha's Haven, follow us on Facebook at the Nahounha Haven for Minority Women Incorporated, and just keep watching what we're doing and find a way to also support us and just be a member. Be a member, become a member, become active. And if you decide that being active, you want to start finding a way to be active, this is a way you can do it. Become a member of our organization, and we'll get you started from there. All right, so let me take a little sip. Sippity sip, sip, sip. Okay. Ooh, we almost there. We almost there. Now, let's get our energy back, because reading this is just, my God. I feel like reading Project 2025 is like when you're a professor and you have like an essay that's just like horribly written, but you still have to go through it so that you can give this student a grade. Like, I feel like this is what it is, and it's like it sucks to read it, but you know you have to finish reading it so you understand what this person is saying or whatever ideals this person is pushing forward. So with all that being said, let's keep going. So facts that are being presented in chapter 11 on education, right? None of them really stood out to me. They added graphs and they added numbers here and there, but like nothing stood out. Nothing was like remarkable, right? But one thing I can say is that because Democrats never, oh, let me just say it like this. Because Democrats or liberals never took the chance to put out their own version of like where we're headed, what strides we're making, what the goals are for us, like on every single level of infrastructure in the United States on a liberal basis. They never gave us any information. Everything is really kept in-house. We don't know how things work. The conservatives took full advantage of that, right? And so what ends up happening within Project 2025 is that conservatives are pushing facts after facts after facts after facts and numbers at us without us really having an opposite opinion, right? Where we can compare the two. Okay, this is what the conservatives are saying is happening, but also this is what the Democrats are saying is happening. Nobody has that because the Democrats never thought it was important to do something like that. And so what now is happening is that all we have is Project 2025 and all of its claims, right? And someone like me who has the time and who has the education to sit there and read through everything little by little, and who wants to go and do the fact checking, has to do that, has to go out of their way to go and fact check every single little claim that 2025 is making, Project 2025 is making. It should not have been that way. Democrats should have not been so elitist, should have not safeguarded all of those infrastructures like that, because now it left all of us vulnerable to Project 2025. It didn't just leave, rural Americans, which is what a lot of Democrats are saying, is like, oh, like Republicans voted this way because like they are being lied to by conservatives and blah blah blah. It's not just them that's being lied to, and the only reason they're being lied to is because this is the only party who's giving them information. So they don't even have the time to sit there and think about, oh, is the information that's being given to them from the conservatives factual or not? They're just taking what they can get. And the conservatives are enjoying it because they have the upper hand in that situation. All of the information they can give the Republicans whatever information they want to, and they know that they're going to eat it up because this is the only source they have. And that's where the Democrats fell short. I hope that this can be corrected. I don't know if they will come out with a counter Project 2025 where they can say, this is what we have done, this is how it benefits all Americans, this is how we're planning to fight back. Maybe that's coming in the future. Hopefully it comes in the future, because we all as Americans deserve to have all information from all sides, so that we can sit it down with all of it in one sitting and really compare and contrast what's being given, and we can make up our minds that way, instead of just one side pushing out whatever information they want to us, and we have to accept it. That's what it is. Excuse me. So, for education, the ideals that are being promoted, right? On page 319, the authors suggests, okay, so first, before we even get started, education in this thing goes from page 319 to 362, right? So on page 319, the authors suggest that conservative leaders eliminate the Department of Education altogether. Just get rid of it. And then on page 320, the authors ask that the leadership incentivize people to go to alternate high schools. Meanwhile, right? Now this is my opinion coming in. Meanwhile, the most successful people in the oligarch that is fully taking advantage of conservative leadership, they did not go to alternate high schools, right? They didn't go to trade school. They went to college. Then now some of them might have dropped out, but they also went to college. And so they're pushing for people to put their children in private schools, in faith-based schools, and to cut the pipeline from high school to college. So to me, it really seems like, and then while they're pushing like trade and they're pushing, alternate faith-based schools, a lot of jobs are being taken away from regular everyday people, whether Democrat or Republican or any other political party. A lot of jobs are being done now by robots or artificial intelligence, right? So we really have to really be conscious of what's really happening. The people who have the most power, the most monetary success within business did go to college, did go to a regular college, a contemporary college. They didn't go to trade school. They didn't go to faith-based schools. We really have to see that what the play is here. Like, what's the reason why you get to go to college and get a 4-year higher education, and then you're telling other people to send their kids to alternative schools? What's the purpose behind that? So then on page 322, the authors talk about, in one breath, they say civil rights should be enforced under proper understanding of those laws, right? Proper understanding of those laws, end quote. In the next breath, they state that gender ideology and critical race theory should be rejected. Yeah. So they say that civil rights should be properly enforced. And the way they're suggesting the proper enforcement of that is that gender identity and race theory should be completely rejected. Let that sit on you for a second. Let that sit on you for a second. So, my opinion on both of these ideals is that the author feels so emboldened to just state it out there, outright, because they don't anticipate so much opposition to that. They don't anticipate so much opposition to rejecting somebody's identity, or how their identity can really affect the way in which they can move through the systems that already are in place to be against them. Okay. So, moving on to page 323, the authors claim federal intervention in education has not improved student achievement. So this to me is just unremarkable of an argument. It's just like it's not an impressive argument at all. They were always going to say that, federal involvement in education doesn't help children or doesn't improve children's grades. They would have had to say, in order to justify wanting to do away with the, federal involvement in education. That's like given, right? But the question to ask yourself as a single mom is, hypothetically, if the federal government wasn't involved and did not put funding towards education, would all children have access to education? Would all children have access to quality education on the same level? And if the answer to that question is no, then their claim here is false. Yeah. Okay, so we're moving on. We're moving on. We're moving on. Page 330. Office of Civil Rights, right? For the Office of Civil Rights, now they're addressing the Office of Civil Rights that protects basically any, they protect groups of people who have faced adversity, who have faced, like racial bias, ableism bias, gender bias, identity bias. Office of Civil Rights protects those people, right? The authors suggest that conservative leadership, enforcement of civil rights protections, federal enforcements of those protections should be given to the Department of, you guessed it, Justice, and the federal courts, which, as we know by now, today is the 28th of February, 2025, Trump's administration has a general control of the Department of Justice and of the federal courts, right? Furthermore, the authors state both the Office of Civil Rights and the Justice Department can enforce civil rights only through litigation. So even if one of these protected groups was to have a legitimate claim of being harmed, right? The Office of Civil Rights and the Justice Department would only be able to go after the people who are harming that group through litigation, we all know litigation takes a long time. So they're just dragging their feet on allowing people the civil protection that they deserve as Americans. So, in my opinion, it essentially looks to me that the conservative leaders want to give the responsibility of enforcing civil rights on a department that has historically been harmful to protected groups. The Department of Justice doesn't always get it right for Black people, for people of color, for women, and other protected groups. The Department of Justice doesn't always get it right. When cops go out there and they murder a Black individual wrongfully, the Department of Justice drags their feet. The Department of Justice allows the police officer to essentially not be held accountable for their actions while they were on duty or off. Unless those police officers are Black, then it's a different story. And it should not be that way in America. So, more than that, if the reason for the Department of Justice, the reason why the conservative leadership, the authors are saying that the conservative leadership should allow the Department of Justice to be responsible for enforcing civil rights is because they know the historical, how historically the Department of Justice has treated protected groups of people in this country. Excuse me. So then we move on to page 331. The authors talk about parents needing to have access to all their child's records without school tampering with it. Here, though, they're specifically talking about a child who identifies as, like something other than a sex other than what they were biologically born with at school. And so, like, I guess maybe some schools have kept that a secret from parents. And so the authors here are saying that schools should not like keep secrets from the parents, basically is what they're saying. And that schools should not tamper with the children's records without the parents knowing, that there should be a general transparency there when it comes to students for their parents. As a parent, I can agree with this little statement here. Yeah, I'm not gonna say that they're wrong. No. I don't think that schools should be keeping secrets from parents when it regards to that parent's child. It's not right. It's dangerous, because parents need to be aware of what's happening with their children so that they can parent their children effectively, right? Now, I understand how it might be dangerous for the child, for some children, depending on like their background, their parents' beliefs and stuff. But that's why we have other organizations in place and other departments to make sure that those children are protected. So that's my opinion on that. Page 340. The conservative authors suggest to end borrower defense repayment, close school discharge, public service loan forgiveness. Essentially, they are suggesting that no matter your financial circumstances, after borrowing to go to school for college and beyond, whatever your financial situation was after coronavirus, it doesn't matter. You should find the money somehow to start paying them back, all of it. It doesn't matter if you're serving your community with whatever employment you have. That should not take away from any of the amount that you have to be paid, which is wrong. There are some people who every day they're making the big sacrifices, doing all sorts of jobs that enrich their community, makes their community safer, makes their community better, makes their community stronger, using the degrees that they paid for with those loans. And I think that should well do them the qualifications they need to get that stuff forgiven, because they're using the degrees to invest back into their community. So here I disagree. So then, I don't think that conservative leaders should be trying to take away loan forgiveness. I don't think so, because people are actually using their degrees to better their communities. So then we move on to page 346. The conservative authors here recommend that gender nonconforming and trans students, basically they want them to experience having those identities not be valid anymore within schools, right? And so, I mean, that's as plainly as they state it, is as plainly as you can interpret it. They are not respecting gender identities. They're not respecting that someone is going through a transition. That's just where they stand. It's a hard line. There's no room for interpretation. The next one is federal lawmakers should not allow those on staff at public schools to keep secrets about a child from the child's parent. Again, I agree with that. I don't think that there should be secrets between the school staff and the parent when it involves the welfare, the well-being of the student. That's just, when there's something that makes sense, I have to say it makes sense. So, because we know that there are departments in place to protect children, no matter how, the bottom line comes to them when it comes to their gender identity and whatever else that they don't feel safe, expressing. So we have to be transparent, and we have to have the lines of communication open. So that's just where I understand it's danger, but I also understand communication is important, transparency is important. So we'll move on. Page 347. Authors want funding. The authors here, the conservative authors, want funding children. So okay, let me put it this way. They're saying that the funding American children receive from public schools should also be made in a form where parents who don't want their children to be in the public school system anymore can take that same amount of money that they would have received for public school education into the private school sector or into faith-based school sector, right? That's what they want. They want to be able to make that form fluid, so all that funding doesn't just go to public school. The parents could also take their child out of public school with that same amount of money they would have received and put them in a private school, or put them in whatever other type of school, charter schools and so on. So that once I got to that point, it really culminated for me that the conservatives are pushing towards the privatization of education. And we all know how privatization of anything leads to really murky waters. So we move on. And we know who that's going to be harming if schools get privatized like that, which means there's no federal regulations that those private schools really have to conform to. That'll always put low income families at a disadvantage, and of course then it would affect students that come from low income households. So then we move on to page 350. 10 years. That's what the authors here are saying, that there should be a 10-year plan where federal spending should be phased out, and that the decision for how students from low-income homes should be educated should go back to the states. So they're saying that federal education funding should be phased out of schools, right? Out of public schools, and that the responsibility for education should fall back to the decision of the states. And the states should decide how children from low-income homes get a quality education. Now, as a single parent, what you have to ask yourself is, in the state that you are in, if the federal government couldn't come in and give funding to public schools, and it was solely the state deciding how they would allocate funds for education and how low-income students would get an education, would your child be able to have a quality education under those guidelines? If the state that you live in right now has sole control over how all children, and specifically children from low-income homes, what type of education, what type of quality education they would get, if they have sole control over that, could your child have access to a quality education? So if your child could have access to a quality education, if your state was making the decisions, then I guess you're okay. But if your child would not have access to quality education, if your state was solely responsible for making sure that your child got an education, then you know that you aren't aligned with what is in this education plan for the conservatives. So now we're moving on to what they're saying is they want to privatize all lending programs. So the programs that lend individuals money to fund higher education, college and beyond, they want to privatize it. They don't want you to be able to get a loan from government agencies, entities, and so on. They want to make it private. You have to go and borrow money from a private company. So, in my opinion, this would inevitably allow these private corporations to pillage students with predatory lending practices. That would send us as an entire nation into even greater educational debt. Right now, the educational debt is big, but if the conservative leaders were to allow the privatization of getting loans for higher education, the debt that we would see as a country for higher education would be unimaginable. It would be disastrous to our forward movement as a country. So we're moving forward. And then we really have to think about, if you are a student, right? If the lenders to help you get into college and pay for college to fund your higher education, if they're privatized, they get to decide who they will approve for these loans. If you're coming from a low income household, meaning you probably won't meet the high threshold to be approved that they will create, right? Let's say this is a hypothetical. How then does a bright student who comes from a circumstance where they're coming from a low income household, how do they get access to higher education? So again, this is the oligarch cartel preying on impoverished Americans, preying on those who need a little bit more support from the government. So we move on. The way that we can see some of what we just discussed come to light is recently, I think it was, today's the 28th, so on the 26th, Jasmine Crockett, who is a politician, I think she is a congresswoman, she put on her Instagram that there was a bill that just passed. And the bill, which I took a screenshot of it, the bill, let's see. I don't know if you guys can see. If you guys can see this, right? So her post said, "This is what a deal with the devil looks like. At House GOP just voted to cut Medicaid, SNAP benefits, school meals, and housing assistance, all in exchange for giving corporations and billionaires a tax cut, all at the expense of the middle class." So then she also put another post, and this is what that post looks like. I hope it's not blurry. I'm going to read it. It says, it says the same thing, but it just shows like the vote, right? So the vote is Republican, yes, 217, no 1. Democrats, 214, no. There was no independent votes, and the totals is 217 to 215. The Republicans passed the bill to cut what applies to what we just discussed, school meals and SNAP benefits. So what they wanted to happen in what we just discussed is happening as of February 26th. So they're passing it. That's how they're doing it. They're taking away what we need as Americans legislatively, using bills, using laws. That's how they're taking away what we need. So then we move forward, right? On page 355, the authors are saying to conservative leaders that they need to remove existing accreditations for like colleges. They need to remove those accreditations and put in place their own accreditations, right? And they, you know how they like to call everything they don't agree with a cartel. They're saying that they need to remove the existing accreditation cartel and basically put their own in. That's as plainly as you can put it. Take away the powers that are and put in your own power that serves your interests, is what these conservative authors are suggesting to the conservative leadership. So, page 357, we move on. Look up, let's see. Oh, this is interesting. They talk about minimizing the bachelor's degree requirements, right? And I found that interesting, right? Because a lot of the times, Black people always are saying, hey, we're overqualified for this position. We're overqualified. When we show up, we're one of the most qualified people in the room. Now, the conservative leaders and the conservative authors of this part of the Project 2025 are saying, we don't care. We're just going to change the rules. Now, it doesn't need to be that you need a bachelor's degree to be qualified for a position. Right? So they're changing the rules of the game. So you and your overqualifications, they don't care about it. So then that hit different for me because it's like one criticism people have about the Democrats is that there's a lot of elitism happening, right? When you go into a space where Democrats are there, Black professionals are there, there is an air of elitism, of excellence, right? You can't sit with us, syndrome happening. And it's because once certain Black people get to a certain level in their careers, in their success, in their business, they become like, they sort of isolate themselves, right? And so it's like they isolate themselves using those degrees that they got, using the pride that having a successful business gives them. They box themselves in and they separate themselves from other Black people coming up. And so it's just like, then it's like those who aren't on their level, which I totally disagree with, cannot be in their same group, cannot be in their bubble. And that is destructive for us as a community, because those of us who have made it to a certain level should be finding ways to help pull the rest of us up so that collectively we can be strengthened as a community, as a Black community, rather than, oh, if you're a part of this fraternity or this sorority, to be a part of this sorority, you need to be elite. You need to be la creme de la creme. And if you're not, you can't be a part of this sorority, the sorority that will help you gain access to what you need to make your business thrive, the sorority that will help you gain access to other like-minded individuals that will help propel your thinking forward, that will help you be more politically active. Black people have fallen into the trap of letting their achievements, letting their degrees pull them away from the community and devalue their community. Meanwhile, the conservatives are not doing that. They're finding any way to round each other up, to uplift each other. And the Democrats messed up there. Now, recently, I think it was like yesterday, I should have taken a screenshot of this, where it was just like, the conservatives are saying, oh, we're not going to celebrate Black History Month or any other, like other groups and stuff. Biden posted and he was just like, oh, we need to celebrate Black History Month. And, I think he said something along, I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, Black people need to, support each other or just basically pushing like camaraderie amongst Black people. right? And I was just like, I understand what the man meant, but also it's like, it's a rough day when like you have to look outside of your community to be encouraged to be brotherly, to be encouraged to uplift each other and strengthen each other and support each other and not backstab each other. It's a hard day, man, for our Black people. Like, we really need to stand together, you know? So sorry about that. Um, Page 361, they talk about ending current student loan forgiveness will save taxpayers $370 billion, right? But they don't talk about what taxpayers will be saving all this money. They don't talk about who those people are. Because a lot of what I'm hearing is that Trump's proposed tax cuts will make poor and middle class people have to pay more taxes. Meanwhile, the uber rich have to pay less taxes. And so the question then becomes, who would be responsible for all these taxes that need to be paid? And if it's us middle class and lower class individuals that's gonna have to pay more taxes, then we should be able to get loan forgiveness, because loan forgiveness helps us at the end of the day. So if we're the ones going to be responsible for paying more of the taxes anyways, leave our loan forgiveness programs in play, because it's not the uber rich that's going to be paying these taxes. That's just my take on it, right? If we're the ones fitting the bill, we get to decide to leave loan forgiveness on the table. So then to move forward, they did talk about like cutting the pipeline from high school to college. Explicitly, they stated it on page 361. Who does that benefit? And to what end would it be to cut the pipeline from high school to college? To what end? To me, that's another way of saying they need a permanent bottom class. And how do you do that? How do you create a permanent bottom class? By making sure that not everybody have access to quality education, quality higher education, where they cannot pull themselves up by their bootstraps, right? So then they want to they it's all seeming to me like they just want to cut access to education for middle class and lower class individuals, right? And students who come from middle class um, and low income households. That's what this is, the whole education chapter. That's really what it's the summation of it is that they're really trying to, in every way possible, diminish access to education. Yeah. On the guise of it will be saving taxpayers all this money. If low income individuals and middle class individuals are the ones who are going to be fitting the bill for all these taxes in the first place, leave our education in place. Our children deserve to be able to go to college if we're paying all these taxes, because it ain't going to be the rich that's going to be doing it. And the rich, ironically, already don't have to worry about their children going to college. They don't have to worry about it. So ultimately, something that the authors do a lot within the reading that I did for chapters 10 and 11 is like they state plainly what their intentions are, right? Hurt the lower class, the middle class, hurt them by taking away education, hurt them by taking away their access to food security, right? Meanwhile, you know, pretending to care about like the taxpayers, pretending that cutting away security of education, security of food will benefit taxpayers. The taxpayers are primarily low income and middle class individuals. It's just like a farce at its plainest point. They're lying right to your face. Yes, basically, to sum it all up, it's like the person who pays the most in taxes, they're going to be taking away your access to education, your children's access to education. They're going to be taking away your food security to your community. So you paying for everything, but they're taking away your education and they're taking away your access to food. And they're making sure that the USDA can't communicate with you about health guidelines. They're making sure they lower regulations for farmers and ranchers and the way that they produce quality products for us. That's what the reality of chapters 10 and 11 are. So do with that what you may, and leave any comments you have for me. And I will see you on the next live, part 3, which would be dabbling in. We will be talking about chapter. Let's see. We're going to be talking about chapters 12, which is energy, and chapters 13, which is environment. So if you want to, you can go and, where are you guys? I lost you guys. You can go and do your reading, and I will see you when I'm ready. Instead of saying tomorrow, I will see you when I'm ready, because these readings, geez Louise, they are something else. So I'll definitely post, maybe give me like 2 days to prepare, to read and prepare, and I'll post when to anticipate that I'll be back to discuss the next 2 chapters. So see you guys. Thank you for watching this live. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Don't forget to visit our website. Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye, bye-bye, bye-bye.